At this point, you've taken great images. But the next question that you have is, how can I continue this so it's more consistent? How can I make my images great every single time? You might take hundreds of images, however, only one or two are great. Creating this consistency is key to every photographer. As a beginner, this is gonna be one of your greatest tasks. So today, I wanna dive into this subject and make it easy. We're gonna be watching a video called 3 Easy Photography Tips Every Beginner Should Know by Neil Danson. While watching this video, I will provide context to what he's talking about. And at the end, I will give you one thing that you can do every single time to create great images consistently. Here's the secret. Every photographer does this and they don't even think about it. All right, so let's get into this.
Morning everybody, fantastic to see you all again. So there are two things in photography. One is the technical aspect, where you want to get everything technically good, you want to get the exposure right, the focus right. That's really important. But the second thing, and a lot of people forget about this, is it's got to be aesthetically good. So the composition's got to be right. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. And I'm going to
So creating the vision is actually just as important or more important than the technical aspect of it. This is because once you understand what you want, the technical part can be learned, or you can research exactly how you can capture that moment, how you can capture that mood.
give you 3 actionable things that will make a difference straight away to your photography, I promise. So we're going to start with focal length and how important focal length is. Pretty much everyone that gets a camera for the first time gets a lens a bit like this, 24 to 70mm lens, and you quite often when you get this lens shoot at 24mm or the wider part of it, because you think landscape photography is all about just getting everything in and getting this amazing big scene in, and that's great, you can get some great results, but also you can get a lot of shots like this one here. And this was a shot that I took a long time ago and I thought this was brilliant, but you can see there's a big area at the bottom here that's not being used. The clouds are nice, but there's not a lot of focal point in it.
Creating images from a wider perspective is going to be something that you do by default, right? Because as a beginner, your eyes getting trained into visualizing the world, and most of the time you want to capture what you see in front of you, and that includes a lot of the foreground. And this is why he brings up the idea that a lot of beginner photographers start taking pictures very wide, right? Because they want to replicate what your eye sees. This is primarily because there's a lack of subjects, or the lack of intention behind exactly what they're trying to capture.
That wider end just didn't have that. But by zooming in a little bit, by going to the 70mm end, you can make photography a lot easier. If you think about it, you're taking that whole scene in and you've got to sort of arrange, composition is arranging these elements in that scene. The more you have in, the more elements you've got to arrange. So the tighter you go in, the more you zoom in, the more you're taking away a lot of those elements that you've got to arrange, and you're focusing in and making the image simpler. I'm going to give you some examples. So this one, you can just straight away, we can go into it and crop it and make this a much better photo. So if we just crop out a lot of the sky, already it's looking better. I've got a bit of a focus point there. Might maybe even crop out that bit. We could probably have that in, couldn't we? So here now, this is already a much better photo. You know, you can see this hill here, you've got a nice diagonal line. I'm not saying that wide angle images aren't great, so, you know, I've taken lots of great wide angle images, like this one here. Yeah, but it's saying that wide angle images aren't great, so, you know, I've taken lots of a much better photo. You know, you can see this hill here, you've got a nice diagonal line. I'm not saying that wide...
So what he did there was create focus from this really big image. Creating focus is your biggest job, because you're trying to tell a story, you're trying to tell the viewer what to look at.
Wide angle images aren't great, so, you know, I've taken lots of great wide angle images, like this one here, but it's a lot more difficult. Here I've got to think really careful about this foreground, I've got to think about this in the background.
Why wouldn't he crop closer to where the water is because the rocks are part of the feel, right? They are part of his subject, right? Those rocks there aren't just afterthoughts. Those are primary focal points that he wants to show, right? That's why you wouldn't crop that image. The previous image, there was nothing really at the bottom to really focus or grab your attention. It was okay to crop in, right? If you had a subject there, if you had something, a point of interest in that foreground, then you might argue that you don't have to crop the previous image. But for this one, the rocks are part of the focal point, so you definitely don't want to crop that out.
These stacks, I've got to think what's at the side, because I've got a wider angle lens. This was 14mm, so it's including a lot, and it's just
Yeah, he's talking about looking at the edges of the frame and seeing how that complements or distracts your subject or what you're trying to convey.
Really a lot more difficult. You've got to think about focus stacking quite often. Again, with this one, there's so much to think about this image. It seems simple, it looks simple when you look at it, but it was really difficult to take. And this is an example of when I was getting a little bit better at wide angle shots, but still, I feel like I've gone just too wide. So again, I can crop in, I think, and get rid of some of this and go to about here. And this is already a better shot.
You have that line coming across the image that kind of moves your eye towards the center and onto the top of the hill here. And in the foreground, you still have those rocks. In the previous image, you still had them, right? That's why you shot wide, because you definitely felt like these images right here were interesting. So you definitely want to keep them in. Even in the crop, you definitely kept them in because they are part of the focal point of the image that tell the story. And on this, it just makes those lines bigger and emphasizes movement with this crop.
I've not got a lot of wasted space in the corner here. I've got these rocks drawing your eye in. So generally, it's better to go and zoom in a bit. Again, this was a shot I took about 15 years ago, and I thought this rock was really interesting at the time. And I see a lot of shots like this when I've judged competitions or when I'm helping people out that are beginners. I see a lot of shots like this where there's a lot of dead space. Again, on this shot, if we just zoom in on this bit here, we can get a shot like this, which I think is much more powerful. It's simpler, you know exactly what you're looking at, this ridge line and this lake in the background. So trying to simplify your images is really important. Again, another example here, we've got a wide scene here. And the problem is with a wide angle lens is that you're not just getting more ground, more elements in the scene, but you're often getting more sky in. And if the sky's a bit boring like this, then it's not great. But just by zooming in a little bit and looking at this shot here, then this is a bit better. And then I've zoomed in and gone portrait and taken this shot, and it just focuses the mind. It makes the whole thing simpler. So I'm not saying that every shot needs to be zoomed in. Of course it doesn't. There's a time for wide angle. But if you're looking to improve your photography, then that's the first step that I'd say, is just think about going to the 70mm end. Now, out of interest, I'll just show you now some photos that I've taken that are between 50 and 100mm.
Take the wide picture and then take the zoomed in pictures. Just because sometimes we feel that the zoomed in picture, like he mentions, might be better in the moment, but maybe later on, you might have to zoom in halfway through, right? And you think, whoa, I really wish I would have captured this other element of the top of the tree. I'm cutting it off. I felt like, maybe if I would have cropped it a little wider, I would have gotten a much better image. So what you can do is just take both images, take a wide, take the more zoomed in, and then later on, you can start playing with those images, and there's nothing wrong with going back and cropping your images. So don't zoom in every single time, use it wisely, obviously. And when in doubt, shoot both. Shoot a wide and shoot a zoomed in.
On to the second point, and the second point is something that I've done myself so many times, and I've talked about this before, but it's just don't put your camera on a tripod when you arrive at a location. The best thing to do is just sit down, have an apple, take everything in, but even then, don't get your tripod out. The tripod should be the very, very, very last thing that you get out. So get your camera and just walk around and take shots. And if you find something, so at first I got this scene here, I was at this location, and I was thinking, well, this is okay, a lot of people take this shot, it's a nice shot, but there must be a better shot. So rather than just putting my camera on my tripod and down, I took my camera and I started to go around. And I found this angle here, so I walked down to these marshes and found this angle. And I almost made the mistake of setting my tripod up and doing this, and I thought, oh no, what I'll do is I'll just go a little bit closer and see if I can find anything else.
I definitely agree with this point of having the tripod be the last thing you set up if you need it. Most of the time, you're not going to need the tripod. However, there will be many instances where having the tripod will become incredibly handy. So set up your shot first, see what it looks like, and then place your tripod and try to replicate what you saw while you have it handheld.
So then I got to this shot here, but I felt like that these grasses and this tree were just a little bit too much in a line. So I tried to move around a little bit, I couldn't, and then eventually I went a bit closer and moved around, and I got this shot here, which was the final image. But that took a lot of sort of maneuvering like this, getting my foot wet a little bit and going up and down. It just makes such a big difference. I can promise you that if you don't put your camera on the tripod to begin with, it will really improve your photography, I promise. Okay, on to the third point, and for that I've just got to go to this shot here. And this shot was in the Langdales, and I was preparing this video and I was going to show you this shot and I was going to show it in different light. But then I thought, I'll make a model. Don't know why I thought that. So my son helped me and we made a model of this, which is quite a big model. So, as you can see, this is my model of that scene, and I thought it'd be good to do this because I thought what I could show you is I could show you, like, now, can you see straight on that that it's quite flat? You know, you don't get a lot of modelling of the hillside very much. But if I move it to the side and shoot from that direction this way, you can see now from this angle how much better it is. So you can see that there's modelling here, and it just looks a lot better basically. There's a big model just to demonstrate that point. It's quite good actually, and it's pretty good. So this is the Langdales, by the way. That's Harrison Stickle. Pretty good, thanks Sam. So that is the scene. You can see I've got this angle of light coming from the side, and light's so important. I can't stress how important it is in photography. If you can get the light right, then you're going to get a miles better shot. And
Understanding light, how to capture it, when to capture it in your environment is definitely going to make your images look striking almost every single time.
That, you know, thinking about shooting into the light, having the light coming from the sides rather than from behind you, and again, this isn't a rule, this is generally what I do, then you can get shots that are very different. So this was with the light slightly behind me of Yosemite, this was the light coming in from the...
Yeah, you see all these images, like...
The light on the mountain right here, that's part of that is one of your subjects, right? The way that the blue contrast with the foreground here of the other mountain is part of the subject, right? So every single time you photograph, light is gonna be a subject whether you want it to or not.
Very different. So this was with the light slightly behind me of Yosemite, this was the light coming in from the side and back really, and you can see just the difference that makes to the scene. It's huge.
And these are different times in the day, so understanding when you can produce that light or when you can find that light is going to be crucial.
So huge. Again, this is a good example. So this was light in Yosemite again, where the light was sort of coming over my shoulder really, and you can see that I don't think this is great because it sort of, these trees sort of mix with Half Dome in the background, but you can see again it's okay. It's sort of okay this, but I feel like the better shot was shot in the other direction when I'm shooting directly into the sun. I get something really dramatic. It makes such a big difference. That was one direction, that was the other. They were taken at almost the same time. And then this shot I think will work better when the sun went down, and we just had that sort of flatter light. So this was when the sun was almost gone off the trees compared with this one. But light makes such a big difference. Again, I'll just show you one more example here. I've shown this before, but it's such a good example. This was when the light was coming a little bit behind me, and as the light was going over to the left and setting, then it produced this shot here, which was much better. This was literally about an hour later, and it made such a big difference.
Light should be one of the things that you think of every single time you take a picture, because they can actually make or break your images. Every single time you take an image, think about, how is this light looking? Is this light adding to my subject? Is it taking away from the subject? Or is it the main focus? Once you take a look at light every single time you take a picture, you're gonna start creating much more dynamic images. So the 3 things I mentioned on this video were: try to zoom in, don't use your tripod right away, and understand light. And I have to agree, these 3 things are great for beginner photographers to understand. If you haven't checked out this video, the link is below and go give it a like. That being said, there is no maximum amount of time that you should take to take this picture. This is something that happens to a lot of beginner photographers. They rush into things. The more precise you are with that image, the more time you put into creating this image and understanding what you have in front of you, this is what's gonna make your images 100 times better every single time. So don't go to the location thinking, hey, I wanna take 100 pictures. Go into the location thinking, I wanna take great pictures. So when you set up a shot, don't rush it. Take your time, have intentions behind every single move that you take. And this FOMO of wanting to get the next great shot is gonna disappear. You'll be focused into creating this one shot that's amazing. And yes, you want to grab as many pictures, as many great images as you can. But if you're just rushing through it, trust me, you're gonna take 100 pictures and get only one good one. And also, taking your time, it will allow you to take into consideration all the tips and all the advice that you get from watching videos like this. It's simple. Be patient and don't rush the process. And that's how you'll take better images more consistently.